They did not accuse Jennifer Ashford of madness in anger. They did it gently. They did it politely. They did it over dinner. One physician, one concerned uncle, one sympathetic aunt, and a single word spoken softly enough to sound loving. Concern. By the time Jennifer understood what they were doing, the paperwork had already been drafted. Because in Victorian England, a woman did not need to scream to be declared unstable. She only needed to refuse. And Jennifer Ashford had refused. Refused to marry a man drowning in debt. Refused to sign documents she had not verified. Refused to surrender control of her father's estate. So they chose the most efficient strategy available to them. They would take her credibility. And once society believes a woman is unstable, everything she says becomes evidence against her. If stories like this unsettle you, if you've ever seen intelligence quietly reframed as hysteria, stay with this one. And if you believe narratives about women who refuse erasure deserve to continue being told, make sure you're subscribed. Because stories like Jennifer's survive only when people decide they matter. Long before anyone questioned Jennifer Ashford's sanity, she was known for her steadiness. As a child, she did not cry easily. She did not frighten easily. She observed. Her father, Thomas Ashford, used to say she had the temperament of a judge and the memory of a banker, which, in a household built upon ledgers and railway contracts, was the highest compliment he could offer. The Ashford estate in Sussex was not ancient, but it was respected. Rail investments, modest landholdings, and disciplined financial stewardship had made Thomas Ashford a man whose word carried weight in Parliament and in parish alike. Jennifer grew up at his side. Not merely in drawing rooms practicing piano and embroidery, but in his study, watching ink dry over balance sheets, listening to debates about tariffs and tenant protections, learning that numbers, unlike people, rarely lied. Numbers tell truth, her father would say, tapping the page. People sometimes do not. She had been 16 when she corrected a minor clerical miscalculation during a trustee's review. The error was insignificant. But her uncle Reginald noticed the correction. And he did not like it. Reginald Ashford was not a loud man. He did not slam doors or raise his voice. His displeasure formed quietly, like frost along the edge of a windowpane. An observant girl, he had said, smiling thinly. Her father beamed with pride. She will manage her affairs one day. Reginald's smile faltered, just slightly. Jennifer saw it. She always saw more than people intended. Thomas Ashford's death was swift. Pneumonia in winter. A fever that would not break. A chill that settled too deeply. By spring, the estate felt cavernous. Jennifer was 23 when she buried him, old enough to understand grief, young enough to underestimate danger. The will was read in the library. She listened calmly. Ashford Holdings would remain in trust until her 25th birthday. At that time, full managerial authority would transfer to her. Until then, temporary oversight would be shared between her uncle Reginald and appointed trustees. There was also a clause, brief, deliberate. If my daughter's competence is ever formally challenged, the Duke of Ravensmere is to be notified for independent review. At the time, the line seemed ceremonial. Her father and the Duke had served together on a reform committee years earlier. Jennifer had met him once, a tall, reserved man with a gaze that assessed rather than admired. The clause did not feel urgent. It would later become everything. The first year without her father passed quietly. Reginald was attentive. Margaret Ashford, her aunt, was affectionate in the way of women who understand that presentation often matters more than sincerity. They hosted dinners. Maintained appearances. Spoke often of Jennifer's delicate adjustment to loss. At first, Jennifer did not object. Grief was expected. Grief was socially acceptable. Grief made others comfortable. But comfort slowly turned into narrative. Margaret began finishing Jennifer's sentences in public. "She grows overwhelmed by estate matters," she would say lightly. "She tires easily. She takes things rather deeply." Each comment seemed harmless alone. Together, they formed a portrait. And portraits, once painted, are difficult to repaint. Lord Edwin Pembroke arrived that autumn. Polished boots. Careful manners. A faint air of desperation he thought concealed. Jennifer recognized it immediately. He praised her intelligence while subtly questioning her stamina. "You mustn't exhaust yourself with figures," he murmured during tea. "I do not exhaust easily," she replied calmly. He smiled. Of course. The smile did not reach his eyes. Reginald observed every exchange. Margaret encouraged private walks. Jennifer declined. Politely. Firmly. It was the first refusal that altered the temperature of the household. The following week, a letter disappeared. It was from Clara Whitcomb, Jennifer's former school companion and one of the few women who spoke honestly with her. Jennifer knew Clara's handwriting intimately. The letter never arrived. When she asked Margaret, her aunt frowned sympathetically. "My dear, perhaps you misremember the date." Jennifer did not misremember. But she let it pass. 2 weeks later, she discovered discrepancies in railway dividend entries. She corrected the figures quietly at dinner. Reginald's fork paused mid-air. "That figure was reviewed," he said evenly. "And revised," Jennifer replied. "Perhaps you are reading too much into minor fluctuations. Numbers are not emotional, uncle." The silence that followed was not loud. But it was decisive. Soon after, Dr. Holbrook began visiting socially. At first under the pretense of routine wellness. He asked about sleep, appetite, mood. Jennifer answered calmly. Margaret hovered. "She has been speaking to herself in the gardens," Margaret confided one afternoon. "I read aloud," Jennifer replied sharply. Margaret touched her hand gently. "You see? Defensive." The word settled into the room like dust. Defensive. Not unstable. Not hysterical. Not dramatic. Just, defensive. The narrative was forming. Softly unstable. And in Victorian England, that was sufficient. Jennifer tested something. At the next dinner gathering, she spoke deliberately about an upcoming investment, calm, measured, factual. Margaret interrupted within seconds. "Jennifer has been under such strain." "I feel no strain," Jennifer replied evenly. Margaret sighed. "It's the denial that worries us." There it was. An accusation that could not be disproven. If she protested, it confirmed agitation. If she remained silent, it confirmed fragility. The trap was elegant. And it was tightening. Late one evening, passing her uncle's study, Jennifer heard her name through the partially closed door. "Temporary guardianship," Reginald murmured. "For her own protection," Margaret added. "Before the marriage contract is finalized." Jennifer stood motionless in the corridor. Marriage contract. So that was the structure. Lord Pembroke was not romance. He was solution. A husband would absorb Ashford Holdings. Authority would transfer legally. And concerns about instability would disappear. Because control would no longer be hers to question. Her pulse remained steady. But something colder settled in her chest. They were not worried about her mind. They were worried about her refusal. And refusal, in a woman with property, was dangerous. The next morning, Reginald spoke plainly. "You will marry Lord Pembroke before spring." "I will not." You are not in a position to decline. I am precisely in that position. For now, he corrected softly. The implication lingered between them. For now. And in that moment, Jennifer understood. They would not argue with her. They would redefine her. And if necessary, remove her. That night, alone in her father's study, she opened his old ledger. Numbers. Ink. Order. Truth. I am not mistaken, she whispered into the silence. Because that was the most frightening part. Not losing her freedom. Losing certainty. If enough people insisted she was unstable, would doubt eventually seep in? Would clarity feel like obsession? Would logic feel like paranoia? She closed the ledger sharply. No. Her mind was clear. And clarity, she suspected, was precisely the problem. Jennifer did not confront her uncle immediately. She did something far more dangerous. She watched. For the next several weeks, she requested duplicate ledgers under the pretense of preparing for full trust transfer upon her 25th birthday. Reginald agreed too easily. That was her first confirmation. Men who feared scrutiny resisted it. Men who were certain scrutiny would fail welcomed it. She spent long evenings in her father's study. Rail shares. Shipping dividends. Tenant accounts. At first glance, everything appeared orderly. But order can conceal movement. Transfers were being accelerated. Debt instruments appeared under secondary estate holdings. Advisory notes were attached to accounts that had never required advisement. And then she saw it. A line item that had never existed in her father's vocabulary. Advisory stabilization allocation. Stabilization. The word lingered on the page like a stain. She turned to the corresponding transfer records. Funds routed through a private intermediary. The intermediary tied directly to Lord Edwin Pembroke. Jennifer leaned back slowly. So the marriage was not simply convenient. It was strategic. Necessary. For someone. Lord Pembroke requested a private walk the following evening. The air was sharp with early frost. You must understand, he began gently, your uncle fears the strain placed upon you. I have expressed no strain. You resist guidance. I resist mismanagement. He smiled faintly. There are whispers, Jennifer. Of what? That grief unsettled you more deeply than expected. And you repeat these whispers? I attempt to protect you. She stopped walking. From what? From yourself. The audacity nearly amused her. And what precisely have I done that requires protection? He hesitated, just briefly. You grow, fixated. On my own estate? Yes. She met his gaze without blinking. And if I decline your proposal? His expression hardened slightly. You would be unwise. Unwise how? He did not answer. He did not need to. That night, she returned to the study after midnight. She removed archive drafts from her father's final year. Compared handwriting. Compared signatures. Certain annotations were not Thomas Ashford's. They were Reginald's. Specifically, authorization for emergency liquidity transfers. Justified under the phrase anticipated instability of primary beneficiary. The language chilled her more than accusation would have. It had already been drafted. Before any physician. Before any evaluation. Before any refusal of marriage. The documentation for her instability predated the claim of instability. Her pulse quickened, not in panic. In clarity. If she were declared incompetent, the estate would require stabilization. If stabilization were required, trusteeship would activate. Trusteeship would fall to Reginald. And if she married Pembroke? Control would become permanent. The elegance of it was breathtaking. Not emotional sabotage. Administrative erasure. The following afternoon, Jennifer entered Margaret's sitting room without announcement. "I've discovered irregular transfers." Margaret did not look surprised. "You misunderstand estate complexities." "I understand them perfectly." Margaret set aside her embroidery. "Jennifer, obsession with minor discrepancies is precisely what concerns us." There it was again. Concern. Weaponized. "You intend to question my judgment publicly?" Margaret asked softly. "If necessary." Margaret's tone shifted. "You force us into painful decisions." The language was changing. From guidance to inevitability. "What decisions?" Jennifer asked evenly. Margaret rose. "Ones we hoped to avoid." 3 days later, Dr. Holbrook returned. Not socially. Formally. He was accompanied by Dr. Marlowe, younger, less assured. 2 signatures were stronger than one. They conducted the evaluation in the library. Questions repeated. Patterns tested. "Do you believe someone intends to harm you?" "Yes." "Whom?" "My uncle." Both physicians wrote simultaneously. "And what evidence supports this belief?" "Financial records." Holbrook tilted his head. "Do you believe financial documents speak to you?" "Numbers do not speak. They reveal." Marlowe shifted in his seat. Holbrook continued. "You interpret ordinary accounting as conspiracy. I interpret unexplained transfers as motive." Holbrook wrote carefully. "Paranoid ideation linked to property fixation." The phrase settled into the air like smoke. And in that moment, Jennifer understood something devastating. They were not evaluating her. They were constructing her. That evening, she passed the study and heard voices inside. "The doctors are aligned," Reginald murmured. "Commitment will appear compassionate," Margaret replied. "And the estate?" Pembroke asked. "Temporary trusteeship until marriage secures permanence." "And if she resists confinement?" "She will not be asked." Jennifer stepped back silently. The decision had already been made. Her consent was irrelevant. The next morning, she acted. She wrote to the Duke of Ravensmere. Brief. Measured. "My father once placed confidence in your judgment. If his trust was well-founded, I require counsel." She sealed it personally. Entrusted it to a stable boy rather than household staff. By evening, the boy had been dismissed for impropriety. The letter never reached the post. Reginald entered her sitting room calmly. "You mustn't burden powerful men with your distress. You intercepted my correspondence. I prevented embarrassment. You cannot declare me incompetent for seeking independent review." "I can," he replied quietly, "if that action itself demonstrates agitation." The elegance of it stunned her. Any attempt to defend herself became evidence. That night, the formal petition was drafted. Temporary confinement under evaluation for mental unsoundness. Grounds cited: emotional instability, estate fixation, resistance to stabilizing marriage. Signed: Reginald Ashford, Margaret Ashford, Dr. Holbrook, Dr. Marlowe. 4 signatures. For concerned parties. No crime required. Only protection. Jennifer did not sleep. She reviewed every conversation. Every ledger entry. Every phrase. Had she misread something? Overinterpreted timing? Seen pattern where none existed? For one brief, terrifying moment, she questioned herself. What if grief had altered her perception subtly? What if clarity was obsession? Her father's voice surfaced in memory. Numbers tell truth. People sometimes do not. She returned to the ledgers before dawn. The transfers were still there. The annotations unchanged. The handwriting undeniable. Reality steadied her. They were not mistaken. They were strategic. The carriage arrived at dusk 2 days later. 2 attendants. Polite. Professional. Margaret wept convincingly. Reginald avoided her eyes. "For your safety," he said. Jennifer did not protest. She did not rage. She did not plead. Because emotion now would validate their narrative. As the gates closed behind her, she made one quiet decision. She would remember everything. Every word. Every signature. Every figure. If she survived this, she would not merely reclaim her freedom. She would dismantle the mechanism that attempted to erase her. The carriage ride to Wetherby House lasted nearly 3 hours. Jennifer did not ask questions. She observed. The attendants were not cruel. They were not impatient. They were practiced. That made it worse. Wetherby House had once been a country manor. Now it stood behind iron gates half-veiled in winter ivy, its stone facade softened by distance and reputation. A brass plaque near the entrance read, "Restoration and Recovery." Jennifer almost admired the irony. Inside, the matron greeted her with professional detachment. "Miss Ashford. Temporary evaluation." "On what grounds?" Jennifer asked calmly. Emotional agitation related to property fixation. The phrase had arrived before she had. Her narrative was already written. She was escorted down a long corridor. Her room was modest. Clean. Quiet. Locked. The key turned softly behind her. That sound lingered longer than anything else. The first days were orderly. Meals delivered at precise intervals. Scheduled walks in enclosed gardens. Supervised reading. No one shouted accusations. They asked questions instead. Repeatedly. "Do you feel persecuted?" "Yes." "By whom?" "My uncle." "Do others agree with you?" "No." Pen scratched carefully after each answer. Consensus, she realized, was sanity. Isolation was pathology. The fewer allies she had, the more irrational she appeared. It was elegant. Terrifyingly elegant. On the 4th evening, during supervised garden time, she noticed another woman watching her from the far end of the path. Pale. Slight. Restless hands. Later, through the narrow gap between hedges, the woman spoke. "What are you here for?" "My uncle," Jennifer replied. The woman smiled faintly. "My brothers." "For what reason?" "I refuse to relinquish our mother's cottage." Jennifer felt a quiet chill. "How long have you been here?" 6 months. 6 months. No trial. No public hearing. Just containment. "Does anyone advocate for you?" Jennifer asked. Clara's expression shifted. "At first. Then fewer. Then none." Jennifer understood something then that frightened her more than confinement itself. Reputation does not follow women through iron gates. It dissolves. "My name is Clara Whitcomb," the woman said softly. Jennifer paused. "My name is Jennifer Ashford." Clara's eyes sharpened slightly. The Ashford? Yes. Clara studied her. Then you may leave. Jennifer did not answer. Because leaving was no longer guaranteed. On the 6th day, Dr. Holbrook arrived for review. You remain fixated on your uncle's supposed scheme, he said evenly. It is not supposed. Your persistence suggests obsession. Truth does not weaken because it is repeated. Holbrook's pen paused. Do you accept that grief can distort perception? No. Why not? Because my perception is supported by documentation. He closed his notebook slowly. Intelligence does not preclude instability, Miss Ashford. The sentence was precise. And deeply dangerous. Days stretched. She requested writing materials. Denied. Excessive rumination is counterproductive. So she memorized instead. Dates. Amounts. Language. Signatures. If they controlled paper, she would become the paper. The matron entered one evening with a small glass. Mild tincture. For rest. I rest adequately. Refusal may indicate agitation. I am not agitated. The matron's expression did not shift. Noncompliance noted. There it was again. Autonomy reframed as instability. Jennifer lifted the glass. Paused. Then set it down gently. I decline respectfully. The matron recorded something. Jennifer wondered how many women had accepted the glass simply to avoid escalation. And how many had later been declared worse because they resisted. On the 15th day, she was escorted before a small internal review panel. 3 men. 1 clerk. Do you accept that your guardians acted in your best interest? No. Do you regret resisting marriage? No. Do you understand why others question your emotional balance? I understand why others benefit from the appearance of imbalance. A murmur passed between them. Too sharp. Too composed. One panelist leaned forward. Do you believe yourself superior to the judgment of your elders? No. Then why resist? Because counsel and control are not identical. The clerk wrote steadily. Capable. Rigid. Resistant. Language forming quietly. That night, alone in her room, doubt entered fully. Not dramatic. Not overwhelming. Just quiet. What if compliance would have preserved peace? What if marriage would have ended this humiliation? What if independence was not strength, but stubbornness? She sat on the edge of the narrow bed. And for the first time, fear pressed against her ribs. Not fear of stone walls. Fear of erosion. If enough days passed, would she begin to question her memory? Her clarity? Her certainty? That was the true danger of Weatherby House. Not cruelty. Gradual persuasion. On the 19th morning, the matron entered with a subtle change in posture. Less authority. More caution. You have a visitor. Jennifer did not allow hope to rise. From whom? An inquiry order has been filed. By whom? The matron hesitated. The Duke of Ravensmere. For a moment, the room felt unreal. Her father's clause. The line in the will. She had written to him. But that letter had never left the estate. Which meant he had come without invitation. Or someone else had alerted him. The matron straightened. He has requested full documentation. Jennifer rose slowly. Then you will provide it. Yes. Authority recognized authority. And for the first time since her arrival, the institution felt uncertain. The receiving room doors opened. And there he stood. Alexander Ravensmere. Unmoved. Unimpressed. Unintimidated. He did not rush forward. Did not soften visibly. He studied her as though evaluating a ledger. "You appear composed," he observed. "I am." "Have they medicated you?" "No." "Good." He turned to the matron. "I require every record of her confinement. Procedure requires." "I outrank procedure." The tone was not loud. It was final. When the door closed behind them, he faced her directly. "My father trusted you," she said. "He did. They intercepted my letter." "I know." "How?" "I investigated financial irregularities tied to your estate." Her pulse steadied. "You believe them?" "I believe numbers." A pause. "And you?" he asked quietly. "Do you believe yourself unsound?" "No." He held her gaze a moment longer. "Then this ends. Not dramatic. Not theatrical. Certain." And for the first time in 19 days, she felt alignment. Someone else saw the pattern. And more importantly, had the power to challenge it. Alexander Ravensmere did not believe in dramatic rescues. He believed in documentation. Within hours of leaving Wetherby House, he filed a formal demand for full confinement petition, medical affidavits, trustee amendments, estate transfer drafts, correspondence logs. Rank opened doors. But rank also drew attention. By evening, 2 letters had already arrived at his London residence. One from a railway director. One from a parliamentary colleague. Both used nearly identical phrasing. Delicate domestic matter. Unfortunate public entanglement. Encouragement toward discretion. Discretion. A polite word for withdrawal. Alexander set the letters aside. If this confinement stood unchallenged, it would not end with Jennifer Ashford. It would establish precedent. And precedent was more dangerous than scandal. The medical file was carefully constructed. Dr. Holbrook had not declared Jennifer delusional. He had written heightened fixation on estate matters. Persistent suspicion disproportionate to available evidence. Emotional rigidity toward stabilizing marriage proposal. There were no hallucinations cited. No violence. No incoherence. Only interpretation. Interpretation was difficult to dismantle. Especially when society preferred women agreeable. Alexander read the file twice. Then a third time. He was not looking for exaggeration. He was looking for overreach. He summoned his solicitor, Edmund Hale, before dawn. Hale scanned the ledgers slowly. These allocations were authorized before any formal medical evaluation, Hale observed. Yes. And the marriage negotiations began before documented concern. Yes. Hale looked up. You are alleging premeditated incapacity. I am stating it. Hale leaned back in his chair. If this fails, Your Grace, your involvement will be remembered. Alexander did not respond immediately. He was aware of the cost. Railway negotiations in the north were already fragile. Opposition would not be subtle. But neither was injustice. File for open hearing, he said finally. Hale blinked. Open court invites spectacle. Private chambers invite quiet burial. Alexander requested private audience with Dr. Marlowe. The younger physician arrived visibly uneasy. You signed the confinement petition, Alexander began calmly. Yes, Your Grace. Did you observe hallucination? No. Delusion? No. Violence? No. Then what clinical threshold justified confinement? Marlowe shifted. Persistent fixation. On her own property. Yes. Alexander stepped closer. If a male estate holder demonstrated identical focus, would you classify him unstable? Silence. No, Marlowe admitted quietly. And why not? No answer came. But the answer was obvious. Gender. Alexander saw it then. Holbrook was steady. Reginald was strategic. Pembroke was motivated. But Marlowe was cautious. And cautious men cracked under public light. 2 days later, Hale returned with troubling news. Reginald has filed a counter-petition. For what? To restrict Miss Ashford's direct testimony. He claims emotional fragility. Jennifer would be represented through guardianship counsel. In other words, her uncle would speak for her. The irony was surgical. Alexander made a decision immediately. She testifies. If the judge agrees, he will. But internally, Alexander understood something dangerous. If Jennifer faltered under questioning, if doubt surfaced, the court could choose stability over nuance. He needed her steady. And he needed himself prepared for failure. He returned to Weatherby House the evening before the hearing. Jennifer sat at a small desk, posture precise. He placed a ledger before her. Explain this transfer. She read it once. £23,000 reallocated under stabilization allocation through Pembroke Advisory Holdings. Purpose? To establish documented financial concern prior to formal evaluation. How do you know? Because the annotation predates the petition. He watched her carefully. No hesitation. No confusion. He changed tactic. What if the court believes grief impaired your judgment? Grief does not alter arithmetic. What if they argue emotional rigidity? Then they must define rigidity. He held her gaze. Do you fear tomorrow? Yes. It was the first vulnerable answer she had given him. Fear of losing? He asked. No. She did not look away. Fear of believing them. The honesty struck him. Instability does not question itself so precisely. You are not unstable, he said evenly. How do you know? Because instability does not audit its own reasoning. A pause. And because your father described you as the most disciplined mind he had encountered. Her throat tightened briefly. You read his correspondence? I keep important letters. Something shifted between them. Not romance. Trust. That night, another letter arrived. More direct. Continued involvement in the Ashford matter may affect pending railway contracts. It was not a threat. It was arithmetic. Support her. Lose capital. Alexander burned the letter. When he visited her the following morning, she asked only one question. Does this cost you? Yes. She waited. He did not elaborate. And she did not ask him to. Silence between them was becoming language. London was unusually attentive that morning. An heiress declared unstable. A duke challenging confinement. Financial motive implied. Carriages lined the courthouse entrance. Jennifer stepped down under supervision. Not bound. Not free. Murmurs moved through the crowd. Alexander extended his arm. Formally. Not possessively. She took it. They walked inside together. Not savior and victim. But allies entering something neither could control fully. The courtroom doors closed behind them. And reputation went on trial. The courtroom was not built for spectacle. It was built for restraint. Dark oak panels. Tall windows filtering winter light. A gallery filled with measured silence. Jennifer stood beside Alexander at the defense table. Not behind him. Not shielded. Beside him. Across the aisle, Reginald Ashford sat composed, gloved hands folded neatly. Margaret's handkerchief rested delicately at her lips. Lord Pembroke avoided Jennifer's gaze entirely. The judge entered. Proceedings began. Reginald's solicitor spoke first. Measured. Concerned. Almost paternal. My client acted solely in the interest of his niece's well-being. Since her father's passing, Miss Ashford has exhibited increasing emotional volatility. Jennifer did not react. Fixation upon financial minutiae, suspicion toward loyal guardians, and disproportionate resistance to advantageous marriage. Advantageous. The word landed precisely as intended. Not coercion. Not manipulation. Advantage. Dr. Holbrook testified next. In my professional judgment, Miss Ashford demonstrated signs of psychological rigidity consistent with emerging instability. Alexander rose. Define rigidity, Doctor. An inability to yield perspective despite consensus. Consensus. A word that sounded responsible. Alexander stepped closer. And what constitutes consensus? Agreement among caretakers and medical professionals. And if caretakers benefit financially from that agreement? A pause. My assessment was clinical. No hallucinations observed? No. No delusions? No. No incoherence? No. Then your diagnosis rests entirely upon disagreement. Persistent disagreement. The courtroom shifted slightly. Not dramatically. But perceptibly. Two railway directors testified next. They described Jennifer as sharp in meetings. Emotionally charged. Excessively questioning. Alexander's tone remained calm. Did Miss Ashford miscalculate figures? No. Did she misinterpret contracts? No. Did she threaten violence? No. Then your concern was tone? The director hesitated. Demeanor. The word sounded hollow once spoken aloud. Tone. Demeanor. Emotion. Nothing concrete. Everything subjective. Then came Dr. Marlowe. Alexander had hoped for hesitation. He received caution instead. Yes, Marlowe said carefully, my colleague led evaluation. I concurred. Based on what independent observation? Alexander asked. Miss Ashford expressed belief in conspiracy without corroboration. Alexander turned to Jennifer. Describe the October transfer. £23,000 under stabilization allocation through Pembroke Advisory Holdings. Is that figure correct? Alexander asked Marlowe. I am not an accountant. Yet you concluded she misinterpreted accounting. The judge intervened gently. Counsel, remain precise. Reginald's solicitor rose smoothly. Your Lordship, Miss Ashford's intensity here demonstrates precisely the rigidity in question. A murmur moved through the gallery. The trap. Jennifer felt heat rise beneath her collar. If she responded sharply, they would seize it. If she softened, they would interpret weakness. For one brief, fragile second, doubt flickered. Not about the numbers. About herself. Was her composure too sharp? Her tone too firm? Her certainty too visible? The courtroom seemed to lean toward that flicker. And this is always the moment, isn't it? The breath before truth either steadies, or collapses. If you followed her this far, if you feel that tightening right now, understand something. Stories like this survive because people refuse to look away when perception tries to override reality. If narratives where intelligence and dignity matter to you, don't just watch silently. Subscribe. Support the stories that refuse to let erasure become normal. Alexander saw the flicker. He shifted immediately. "Miss Ashford," he said evenly, "do you consider yourself superior to your guardians?" The room stilled. "No." "Then why resist their counsel?" "Because counsel and control are not identical." Silence deepened. She continued. "My father trained me in estate management from childhood. I do not resist guidance. I resist surrender." Her voice did not waver. The flicker disappeared. And with it, the prosecution's strongest leverage. Alexander introduced the intercepted correspondence log. The dismissed stable boy. Predated trust amendments. Ledger annotations preceding medical concern. These actions, Alexander said calmly, predate any professional evaluation. He turned toward Lord Pembroke. "Were you aware of debt negotiations tied to Miss Ashford's estate prior to her evaluation?" Pembroke swallowed. "Yes." The word landed heavily. Reginald's composure thinned, not shattered. Thinned. Finally, the judge addressed Jennifer directly. "Miss Ashford, do you believe your guardians acted maliciously?" The room went silent. This was dangerous. Accusation could sound hysterical. Denial could sound naive. She chose precision. "I believe they acted profitably." A ripple moved through the courtroom. "And do you feel anger?" "Yes." "Does that anger impair your judgment?" "No." "Why not?" "Because anger clarifies injustice. It does not fabricate it." The judge held her gaze longer now. Searching. Testing. Finding no fracture. The ruling came without theatrics. Temporary confinement of Miss Ashford is overturned. Full autonomy restored. Independent audit of trustee conduct ordered. No applause. No gasps. Just release. Margaret's handkerchief stilled. Dr. Holbrook avoided eye contact. Reginald's shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. Jennifer did not visibly exhale. But something inside her loosened. Alexander inclined his head slightly. The battle was won. But outside the courtroom, society was waiting. The courthouse steps were crowded. Not with applause. With observers. Society rarely erupts when injustice is corrected. It recalibrates. Jennifer descended the stone steps slowly. Alexander walked beside her, not shielding, not leading, simply present. A reporter leaned forward. "Miss Ashford, do you feel vindicated?" She paused. "I feel accurate. Not triumphant. Not emotional. Accurate." It unsettled them more than tears would have. Within days, invitations thinned. Not vanished. Thinned. Women who had once praised her intelligence now praised her resilience. It sounded supportive. It felt distancing. At Lady Winthrop's musicale, conversation dimmed as Jennifer entered. She felt it, not hostility. Adjustment. Across the room, two matrons whispered behind fans. She carried herself well. Too well. Composure itself had become suspicious. Alexander observed without commentary. In the carriage home, he spoke quietly. "Would you prefer we withdraw for a season?" She considered. If I withdraw now, they will assume fragility. And if you remain, they will assume defiance. A pause. And which do you prefer? She met his gaze steadily. Let them assume strength. He nodded once. Then we remain. 3 days later, a letter arrived for Alexander. The seal bore parliamentary weight. Measured language. Careful phrasing. Your recent involvement in the Ashford matter has drawn attention. Alignment with controversial domestic disputes may affect forthcoming railway negotiations. In other words, you risk capital for a woman. He read it once. Then burned it. Jennifer watched the flame consume the wax. Does this cost you? She asked quietly. Yes. He did not soften the answer. Do you regret it? No. Silence settled between them. Not strained. Solid. Retaliation came quietly. 2 railway partners withdrew from contracts tied to Alexander's northern holdings. Coincidence, on paper. Calculated, in reality. Jennifer saw it in the ledgers. Revised projections. Extended timelines. Longer evenings at his desk. One night, she closed the accounting book gently. This is because of me. It is because of him, Alexander corrected. But he targeted you through me. And if I had not intervened, he asked calmly. She met his gaze. Then I would have been silenced. He nodded once. Then the cost is acceptable. Not romantic. Not dramatic. Measured. And that made it stronger. Dr. Marlowe returns. A week later, a letter arrived addressed to Jennifer. Dr. Marlowe requested private audience. Against some counsel, she agreed, with witness present. Marlowe entered pale. I misjudged, he said quietly. Or you calculated, she replied evenly. He swallowed. There was pressure. From my uncle? A slight nod. And from Lord Pembroke. She absorbed this without visible reaction. Why come now? Because public opinion is shifting. I do not wish my name attached to impropriety. Honest. But self-serving. You are not malicious, doctor, she said calmly. You are cautious. He lowered his eyes. I will provide affidavit clarifying professional ambiguity. Do so. When he left, Alexander asked only one question. Do you feel closure? No. Good. She looked at him. Closure granted too easily invites repetition. He studied her carefully. She was not hardened. She was sharpened. One evening, wind pressed softly against the windows of Northwood. Jennifer stood alone in the library, the same room where doubt had once nearly taken root. Alexander entered quietly. You are restless. Yes. Why? She turned toward him fully. Because I do not know who I am in this new shape. He waited. When I was accused, I was defending myself. When I was confined, I was surviving. When I was in court, I was proving something. And now? Now there is no enemy. He considered that. There is always purpose. And yours? To ensure you never doubt your own mind again. The words settled between them. Not dramatic. Not urgent. Certain. She stepped closer. I do not remain here because you saved me, she said softly. I remain because I choose you. He did not move first. That mattered. Her hand brushed his sleeve. His fingers lifted slowly, asking without words. She nodded. The kiss was not rushed. It was deliberate. Two people who had fought carefully. And won precisely. Peace rarely arrives without one last attempt to disturb it. A final document surfaced. Hidden. Misfiled. A life insurance amendment. Signed weeks before Thomas Ashford's death. Beneficiary, Reginald Ashford. Clause, estate review upon medical instability of primary heir. Forgery was no longer theory. It was evidence. Jennifer read it twice. Then folded it carefully. If this becomes criminal prosecution, Alexander said quietly, it becomes public. And my sisters? She asked. Collateral. She closed her eyes briefly. Justice versus mercy. But this time, the decision came easily. Expose it quietly to his financial partners. Alexander's gaze sharpened. Strategic. Within weeks, Reginald's alliances dissolved. Not through scandal. Through isolation. Investments collapsed. Invitations ceased. He left England without ceremony. Margaret followed shortly after. No arrest. No public disgrace. Just absence. More permanent than spectacle. Some stories end in punishment. Some end in applause. This one ends in restoration. If you believe restoration is more powerful than revenge, if you value stories where strength is measured, not loud, then stay with us. And if narratives like Jennifer's deserve space in your listening life, you know what to do. Spring did not arrive dramatically. It arrived quietly. Snow receded. Heather returned to the moors. Northwood breathed differently. And so did Jennifer. Ashford Holdings was restored in full. But not absorbed. Not merged into Ravensmere accounts. Not softened into marital consolidation. Preserved. Independent. At her insistence. She sat across from the estate solicitor in Northwood's library. I will oversee Ashford Holdings personally, she said calmly. The solicitor hesitated. Traditionally, upon marriage. Tradition, she replied evenly, is not obligation. Alexander did not interrupt. He did not reinforce her authority. He did not soften it. He let it stand on its own. That mattered. After the solicitor departed, she turned to him. Do you disagree? No. Even if my management competes with yours? If you compete, he said quietly, it will be intelligently. She smiled faintly. That is not romantic. It is honest. That is why it works. The annual Northwood Tenant Assembly arrived in early April. In previous years, Alexander had addressed the tenants alone. This year, he stepped aside. Jennifer spoke. Not as scandal survivor. Not as Duchess-in-waiting. As proprietor. She discussed crop rotation incentives. Widow relief stipends. Literacy grants for tenant children. Clear. Measured. Specific. The crowd did not react to her beauty. They reacted to her competence. Afterward, an elderly tenant approached her. My lady, he said gently, it is good to hear figures explained plainly. It is good to have them understood, she replied. Alexander watched without stepping forward. He did not need to validate her authority. It was visible. Society noticed before they announced anything. You are often seen together, Lady Winthrop observed carefully over tea. Yes, Jennifer replied calmly. Anne. And what? A faint smile. You will not confirm? I will not defend happiness as scandal. The response traveled quickly. Not engagement. Certainty. That evening, in the quiet of the library, Alexander stood near the window. You have been patient, she said. Yes. Why? Because if you chose me too soon, I would question the reason. She stepped closer. I do not choose from fear. No. I do not choose from gratitude. No. I choose because I want partnership. Silence settled between them. Then he reached into his coat pocket. Not for a ring. For a folded document. She frowned slightly. He handed it to her. She unfolded it slowly. Ashford Holdings. Full legal transfer of final oversight powers exclusively to Jennifer Ashford. Independent from marital estate. Irrevocable. She looked up. You would hold no control over Ashford, he said quietly. Even after marriage? Especially after. She studied him carefully. Then said softly. Now ask me. He did not kneel. He stepped closer. Took both her hands. And spoke plainly. Will you stay? Not marry me. Not belong to me. Stay. She did not hesitate. Yes. Not every woman in history was believed. Not every woman reclaimed her name. Many were folded into silence and called fragile. Jennifer was not. And if stories like hers, where autonomy triumphs without spectacle, deserve to continue, then you already know how to support them. The narratives we choose to follow shape which voices history remembers. It was small. Deliberate. Held in Northwood's chapel. No grand display. No performative reconciliation. Thomas Ashford's portrait rested quietly in the front pew. Jennifer paused before taking her place. Not from hesitation. From acknowledgement. Alexander stood waiting. Not dominant. Not triumphant. Present. His vows were simple. I will not govern you. I will stand beside you. Jennifer's voice was steady. I do not enter this marriage rescued. I enter it resolved. There was no tremor. Only certainty. After the guests dispersed, they stood alone along the stone ramparts overlooking the moors. Wind moved gently across the hills. I once thought my mind was the thing they would take, she said quietly. They tried, he replied. They nearly succeeded. But they did not. She turned toward him. They will never again. He pressed his forehead lightly to hers. The wind carried no threat now. Only space. Ashford Holdings expanded. Tenant literacy programs increased. Rail dividends stabilized. Jennifer became known not as the girl once declared unstable, but as the woman who restructured her inheritance and refused erasure. Young women sought her counsel. Not about scandal. About contracts. Alexander remained steady. He did not rescue her again. He did not need to. One evening, Jennifer stood again in her father's study. The same room where doubt had once nearly taken root. Now filled with signed agreements bearing her name. Clear. Ordered. Unassailable. Alexander entered quietly. Do you regret intervening? She asked. No. And if it had cost everything? He met her gaze. It gained everything. She closed the ledger gently. They had not destroyed her. They had underestimated her. And that miscalculation built her future. Jennifer Ashford was not saved from madness. She was vindicated against manipulation. She was not rescued by a duke. She chose a partner who respected her autonomy. She did not inherit strength. She exercised it. And long after the whispers faded, her name remained intact. Not because she was protected, but because she refused to surrender it.